Tonight's keynote speakers need little introduction. They are women of distinction who have leaned in every opportunity to support an open internet that supports human rights and innovation. It is my sincere pleasure to first introduce Mitchell Baker, Chairwoman of the Mozilla Foundation. As the leader of the Mozilla Project, Mitchell is responsible for organizing and motivating a worldwide collective of employees and committed volunteers who are breathing new life into the internet with the Mozilla Firefox web browser and other Mozilla products. And as chair of Mozilla, she continues her commitment to an open, innovative web and the infinite possibilities that it presents. She has been profiled in Time magazine as a Time 100 scientist and thinker, honored in 2009 as the winner of the Anita Borg Institute's Women of Vision Award, and in 2010, the recipient of the Ann Berter Award for Creative Leadership. Please give a warm welcome to the chairwoman of the Mozilla Foundation, Mitchell Baker.
All right, first test of technology. There we go. Well, it's great to be here, and it's really humbling to see the number of friends of CDT and of the policy views that we're working towards. You know, Mozilla often looks and feels like a standard commercial vendor. We try to do that sometimes. We try to produce product that look and feel like other software products and that are world-class and that lead. But for us, what we do is something different, and our products are something different. We do all the things that we do. We build Firefox because we are trying to build digital citizens. And we are trying to build a layer of the internet and of people who use it, who see themselves and actually live as more than consumers. That is, as citizens, with the engagement of the infrastructure that underlies our society, with the capacity and the competence and the interest and the desire to lean in or dig in or engage in the fundamental infrastructure that governs our lives would be too strong, but increasingly influences the way our lives are lived. The internet is clearly the communications technology of our era. And in its formation, it has design principles that are deeply democratizing. And these are principles that allow many of us to get involved, many of us to be decision makers, many of us to have influence, many of us to have impact over our own lives. And they are design decisions that allow us to understand the privacy and security consequences of what we do. And they are design decisions that have built immense value and change and problem-solving capability. And so what we do at Mozilla has been to try and build those design decisions into more layers of human experience. We try to build them into our products, and we hope that if you use our products and dig into them, you will increasingly find openness and opportunity and innovation. We try to push other members of the industry to do the same thing. We're very proud to have made a market, and that Microsoft has followed with its browser, and that Apple followed and Google followed. We see that as a success. Thank you. We also try to build communities of people who live lives as citizens. Increasingly, consumption is available. The web is easy to consume. Things are for free. It's easy to get more, see more, input more, have more inputs. We're trying to build a layer that is the complement of that, which is engagement, in a model much more like citizenship and a much more democratized fashion. We've done that with Firefox. We're going to try and do that in the mobile space as well. And increasingly, we've been looking at policy. And we're looking at policy because it's creating an ever greater impact on the infrastructure, our ability to communicate, our ability to have an open and innovative society, and on the democratic quotient of our lives. And so when we look at policy, at Mozilla we try to have a pretty narrow focus. Our policy is focused on things that impact the structure and the nature of the internet, things that might impact its democratizing qualities, and things that impact the ability of people to actually behave as citizens. Now that sounds narrow, but it turns out it can be broader than it might seem. Because it's not that often that a policy is proposed as, oh, I want to break the internet. Oh, you know, that internet thing, it's not really that good. Life was just better with TV. Let's just not have the internet anymore. Or even, wow, it's been disruptive. You know, I like the stability of my parents' generation. Let's go back to that. Right? We don't hear that very often. Every once in a while, sometimes I think global governance sounds a little like that, but not so much. But what we hear instead are sort of legitimate social and policy questions that are framed in a way that, intentionally or not, have severe potential damage to this fundamental infrastructure. And so, there we go. We rarely hear policy framed as dismantling the internet, but the impact of a policy can be quite different than its goals. And so we're getting more involved in policy because we find that the impact of potential policies is increasingly deeper on the nature of the internet. And so that has forced us to move into policy more. Now, we are at heart technologists. And so when we look at policy, that's a very different world, and we think, oh, you know, should we really be there? Do we have the expertise? Do we have the stamina for what's involved in policy making? And increasingly our answer is yes. And the Mozilla communities around the world are demanding that we get involved. Mozilla is at its heart a nonprofit organization. We're a public benefit organization, and we mix employees and volunteer communities globally. And increasingly those communities are jumping up and down and demanding that we get involved in policy, because what happens in the United States is often mirrored elsewhere, and often the mirror is even worse than here. Plus, of course, there's plenty of indigenous legislation that's pretty disturbing. And so we're looking at the unintended impact of many of the policies that are proposed. And as I said, we don't really hear the policy proposal as, I want to dismantle the internet. But what we do hear fall into a few general themes that make us look up and think about whether we should get involved. And one of those themes is security and individual rights, because security is such an emotional and deep topic and so critical. And it's very clear today that security and network technology is a high priority, where national security is at stake, the security of kids is at stake, and the security of vulnerable people, and actually each one of us has new components as we live online. And so that's a very deep social question that will take us a long time to work out. But what we've seen so far is that the topic of security often becomes an absolute, and that the discussion of security versus individual rights, or privacy or security, or First Amendment rights, or my relationship as a citizen to the nation state occurs in a different framework. We have hundreds of years, those of us living here, anyway, hundreds of years here and in our European heritage of balancing security needs with individual needs. And we have a language for doing that, and we have a history of balance and a way of social discourse. And we're different than Europe, But we have a similar way of thinking about what these balances are. Each country figures out its own balance, but we have a tradition of what it means to build security, national and personal security, and to respect a degree of human rights. And what we see when the internet is involved is that the power of the internet often seems to override all of that. And our discussion of security comes in a different context and with different balancing. And we're not as explicit about looking at the heritage we have about what's the balance between the two. And so our role in policy is to try and encourage this balance again and to use the heritage that we have. The internet is powerful, but simply because something is a network capability doesn't mean that we should engage in absolutes. So that's one area where we've looked up and said the voice of technologists might actually be useful in this case. What's possible in security? If we have this type of legislation, what does that actually do to individual rights that might not be apparent? And a second topic where we see this phenomenon comes in legislation related to stability. Now, it's often not phrased that way, but if you think about protecting the business models that exist, or protecting the industries that exist, or protecting jobs that exist, these are all, again, important social questions, and they relate to stability and the status quo, and what is the value of a particular industry and a particular set of jobs. We see this in content, of course, and we'll see it increasingly in a range of other industries. And so those are questions to be debated. And once again, we do have a long history. What we see, looking from our perspective, is that the stability, security, existing industries, existing jobs is discussed without the counterpart of innovation. And that when you protect security, or you protect the status quo, or you protect jobs, that may be a fine policy decision. But the side effect is that innovation and new business models and new things are limited. And so our goal in policy at Mozilla is to make sure that the innovation potential, the lost opportunity cost, is made apparent. For us, of course, since we live in the industry and we live and breathe technology and we're sort of geeky and obsessed by it, the hidden opportunity cost is obvious. But if you're not that engaged in the industry, it can be very opaque and obscure. And so part of what we hope to do is offer ourselves as a resource for what's happening, as a resource for why people are so upset, as a resource for why you find people on the streets. It's because some of these trade-offs between innovation and stability. Remember, young people today have, these immense unemployment problems globally, and so the status quo and stability does not look good to them. Huge parts of the world have no future for 50% of their population. So protecting the status quo might be a very valid policy decision here, but it does not feel the same way in other parts of the world. And so that hidden opportunity cost, both because we have this technology basis and because we have global communities of very young volunteers around the world, we feel like we might have something to offer. We ourselves at Mozilla have been pushed a few times into policy decisions by our communities on the ground who have jumped up and down and said, no, you're sitting in California, you don't understand what's happening. And so as we learn more about those things, we realize that many policies that seem US-based actually have impact around the world, and that it's easy to miss that if you're not deeply involved in it. And so as I was walking around the Capitol today, I came across this quote from Justice Brandeis. I, too, am trained as a lawyer and worked as a lawyer for a decade. And Justice Brandeis, of course, is an icon. And so I thought it seemed to fit to say that these questions of individual liberty, balancing them with security, individual opportunity, how much innovation, how much space is there for me as a human being to innovate? If I don't have a job and will never have a job and am never going to have that much opportunity in the industries of the status quo, what's available for me? Like, those are part of the definition of liberty. And so when we came across this quote, I thought it was too apropos to leave aside. So we intend to be more involved in policy at Mozilla. We hope to offer ourselves as a resource, as I described, but we have a very clear agenda. And our agenda is to maintain the openness and innovation and opportunity that the internet has brought in the last 20 years, and to hope to move that forward, not only for those of us in the United States, but globally as well. See if I can. Let's see, there's a relay here in the back, so I don't quite control the slides, so I'm going to wait here. So we intend to stay engaged in policy and probably be more engaged in policy. But we have one other asset at Mozilla, and that is that we are able to build technology. So policy is important. It's a key aspect of building our social consensus and social fabric. But another critical aspect is the actual tool, the technology that we use. So we built Firefox to try and bring this level of openness and opportunity and digital citizenship into online life. And we are going to try and do it once again in the mobile space. The mobile space does not currently have many of the traits that are really important to us. And so you will see us become increasingly active in that part of the world as well. And we'll see, which policies are particularly aimed or appropriate for that world. It may be that the topics I outlined before will cover everything, but if there are particular policies related to sort of the mobile space or the explosion of data in particular, you will also see us active there. We've been a leader in the privacy discussion for a number of years. We pioneered Do Not Track after a call from Julius for a different solution. And we expect to continue to do that. We anticipate that these issues will become more important in the next few years. Phones, tablets, of course, but increasingly many devices will transmit data about us. It turns out that sensors are really, really cheap, and gathering data and transmitting it is really, really easy. The hard part is who controls it. Are you the actor? Or are you the object that gets manipulated, either by commercial entities or by your government or some other government, our government, some government overseas? That's the hard part. It's the human experience. And how do we as human beings actually have some relationship or control to this data? Because unmanaged, as it turns out, human beings, we have stories about ourselves, and they're not always accurate, and data will tell a very accurate story. Exactly when you got up, exactly what you ate, and there's a lot of data. And so it is conceivable in the future that the devices that we carry or the devices that track and sense things will know more about us than we do. So our goal is to try and put us back in the middle of that, so as all that data moves, we have some involvement, if not absolute control, in doing that. So we intend to try and combine a policy focus with our product focus, and in all things to try to promote openness. We do that in our products and in our policy. This community has a key role in the openness of policymaking. It's really tempting. We've seen a few examples of policy made in secret. That will be a disaster. The protests that we've seen in the last couple of years, SOPA, PIPA, ACTA, part of that is last resort. And so to the extent I urge all of us to aim for openness in policymaking. The internet is key. It's the key communications channel that we'll be using. Defining the structure of that channel in secret without the involvement of citizens will be a disaster. Thank you. The current U.S. policy of encouraging our trade allies to structure the internet in support of particular policies through closed trade negotiations in which the text of the treaties is not available, the discussion is not available, citizens can't be involved in that, is also a policy for disaster. So if the trade, thank you. So if our trade negotiations need to be secret, then the structure and function of the network life should be removed from those discussions and conducted in an environment where citizens have some, if not a lot, of opportunity to actually be engaged and give their opinion. So you folks here are the policymakers. We're new to it. We think we have a particular perspective. We hope it's useful. We're pretty clear about the technology and the principles that govern the nature of life online. We hope we can work together and add something to the policy piece. And in all things, in the most simple fashion, I urge you and I hope that we can all promote openness. Thank you.